The UCLA Bruins have picked up a major commitment from the state of Florida.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into a special edition of Locked On the Portal in a crossover with Locked On Bruins. We're going to be talking about the most recent commitment for UCLA, Micah Smith, but he's not a California kid. Heck, he's not even somebody west of the Rockies. He's from the state of Florida. To help me break that down and what it means for UCLA recruiting, not only this year, but long-term for DeShaun Foster and his staff, is none other than Locked On UCLA Bruins host, Zach Anderson. Am I going to pronounce this right? Yoxsimer?
Yoxsimer, yes. First try, let's go.
Now, there we go. So first off, you and I had spoken about Champ a while back. I lived in Florida for quite a while. I've been around him. This is the kid, like, when he was a freshman in high school, we knew. Like, he was 290 pounds or something like that. He's a freshman in high school. Plays at Vero Beach. It's a program that's always had players, always will have players, and everybody offered it. So when you heard UCLA had a shot at him, were you skeptical? Because, like, he had offers from Miami and Florida State and all these southern schools. But here comes UCLA. What's the connection there? What have you heard on the background to Champ?
I think the big thing is UCLA knows they need offensive linemen. And after what they did in the spring transfer portal window earlier in this 2025 year, they're starting to swing big for the class of 2026. Now, you could go in Southern California and find equally talented offensive linemen, but to go across the country in what other conferences might call their recruiting hotbeds in the SEC, other Big Ten schools, other ACC schools, I was stunned. And I'm still a little worried that obviously this might change. This echoes a big lineman commit UCLA got for the class of 2025. It wasn't an O lineman, it was a D lineman, Epi Satanale. He was also, just like Micah Smith, interested in Ohio State, some of those big schools, and he eventually flipped. But for now, and now that maybe we have the House settlement and that might change things in the future, maybe this keeps his commitment, but with no connection necessarily to SoCal other than two different offensive line coaches, right? He was initially recruited by Juan Castillo from UCLA, and then the new offensive line coach, Andy Kwan, who, from what I've read, he had a great relationship with, and that's in the span of months of him being hired. That just speaks to DeShaun Foster's staff coming in and maintaining that relationship, and how the Bruins are saying, hey, we are emphasizing recruiting, and we know we were horrible in the trenches in the last couple of years.
I agree. Like, their O-line last year, they were at a point, except for like walk-ons and different stuff on the 2D happens, but like, didn't they have some guys start that were walk-ons at one point, or guys?
Yeah, former walk-ons. I mean, we obviously heard from Carson Schweitzer, the linebacker, went from walk-on to NFL draft pick, but when you're doing that on the O-line, and then he was your best O-lineman, and then they're transferring, UCLA has gone a little bit more towards the portal route, literally, right, as we're locked on the portal, towards the offensive line last couple of years. And then from Chip Kelly, it didn't necessarily work. DeShaun Foster obviously was brought on late in that recruiting cycle last year. So we had to pick up the pieces from the pieces. And at some point, that's not a lie. And now we're starting to see, hey, all right, we can look a year ahead. And this is with UCLA losing Stacy Ford to Oklahoma. They brought in a new director, senior personnel leader of recruiting. So with changing offensive line coaches, changing overall head coaches, and your recruiting overhaul changing a couple of times, I would say this is a very impressive get for UCLA, considering the topsy-turvy nature of the portal, what NIL is going to look like now and in the future. And this is huge because the Bruins clearly weren't good at running the football or protecting Ethan Garbers or Dante Moore the year prior to that. You get a guy like this, and whether it's Nico as a junior or whoever plays quarterback in 26, this is a good staple and centerpiece for an offensive line class.
I think Champ will be able to come in and play right away, not only because UCLA's need, it's very obvious from what you just said there, Zach, and thank you for the overview of scariness, because that's just insane at a program like UCLA to me. But it is what it is. And in today's world, you lose one or two kids get hurt, you can fall off a cliff. UCLA is as fortunate as they could be that it didn't go worse for them last year. But I think Smith will be somebody that plays as a freshman. I don't know if that'll be at guard. I don't know if that'll be at tackle. It depends on who you talk to, where he'll end up playing. But I've seen him play tackle before at the Under Armour event, and going against elite player like Florida's loaded with defensive linemen. He handles himself very well in one-on-ones. That bodes well because, as you know, the Big Ten is loaded with defensive linemen too. It's not like you're going to walk in and not get challenged. Even some of the mid-level and low-level, they got guys that can make your quarterback very, very uncomfortable in a hurry. So I think he could be your starting right tackle as a freshman, maybe a right guard. Wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if he's going to play left tackle or not. That's a lot. But this is also something else that I think is very, very important. You got to set a trend. Who's the first guy? Who's the first really elite, I can go wherever I want to player on the offensive line you get? And to put it in perspective, for those who don't know, Ohio State coveted Micah Smith. The defending champs, that probably carries a little bit of weight. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that other offensive linemen that the Bruins are recruiting have heard from DeShaun Foster. And quite honestly, everybody from the back office and the staff, like, he got on board. He's going to play early. Why don't you come and join us? When we come back, I want to talk about, is UCLA on the recruiting rise? Is this kind of the first step? Because it is a bit of a rebuild for DeShaun Foster. When we come back on this crossover, Locked On Bruins and Locked On the Portal, we're going to be talking about that next here on this podcast. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and taking control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. It's easy to collaborate with your partner as well. Instead of keeping all your capital in different places, you can track your personal accounts, set goals, and more under Monarch Money without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, Zach, let's talk a little bit about your UCLA Bruins in terms of what's next. We just went over, hey, Champ Smith's big pickup. But you also mentioned something to me that I was going to ask you about, so you just preemptively hit this. They put more emphasis on recruiting. Do you think that is something that's specific to a position overall? What's the gist that you get from the Bruins?
I think the big thing DeShaun Foster has as UCLA head coach, he saw what was really declining at the end of the Chip Kelly era, and that was recruiting. And now Chip Kelly's got a lot of love from him going to the NFL and success at Oregon and having some, a 1 to 2 year stint at UCLA where it didn't look like it was going horrible. But what was really left in the dust was, SoCal high school recruiting relationships and recruiting in general. Now, Kelly did hit a lot in the portal, but DeShaun Foster's like, wait a minute. In this NIL era, in this new day and age, you have to literally and figuratively foster relationships. And he's done just that, overhauling the staff where he's like, wait a minute, I know where my weaknesses are. He couldn't necessarily address that in one spring portal window in early 2024. But when he's like, wait, let's start and build and get a 2025 class, he did a decent job, even had a good defensive line commit before he flipped to Ohio State, Epi Satanale. And then when somebody flips, they have somebody waiting in the wings. When Madden Iamaleava flipped, they had an offensive coordinator and a quarterback ready to go, and they still got Madden to come back and change their quarterback. So I think he knows what the weaknesses are. At the moment, it's the trenches. When UCLA had a defensive stronghold at the linebacker D-line position, what did they do this offseason? They addressed their lack of defensive backs and safeties. Now, the next couple of recruiting classes, there will be more linebackers, D-linemen to build that back up. So I think he has an idea of which class is building back up the depth in certain positions. And most importantly, he's just getting out there and making his coaches make names, make faces, and make relationships. And that's just something Chip Kelly never did. And the joke was what? He made more trips to recruiting as an Ohio State offensive coordinator than he did as UCLA head coach. Like that's where it was at the end of the Chip Kelly tenure versus what DeShaun Foster has changed in his first year plus as head coach.
That's probably a big deal because you mentioned something that just blows my mind. I don't know what the total population of the greater Los Angeles area is, 15, 20 million people. I mean, it's insane. And UCLA has done a very porous job, even before Chip was there, of recruiting in their own backyard, which makes no sense. If DeShaun Foster, who's an LA guy himself, really dedicates to recruiting the area and his staff follows suit, there's no reason they can't be a top 25 program. And remember, this is his alma mater. He's got money. There's really no reason for him to leave unless he just wants to be a head coach in the NFL, and that would be way down the road. This is not just an interesting opportunity, but one that I've been waiting for a long time. And it's been a while since UCLA was consistently good. And like you said, Chip hit on the portal. That was super high risk, but he did it. And give the man credit. But he didn't want to recruit. He's never been a recruiter. He doesn't like it, and that's why he went to the NFL from Ohio State after last year. If Foster dedicates himself to it, it's not hard to sell UCLA. It's in one of the most beautiful areas in the world on the north side of Los Angeles.
It's great. Yeah, because you could have a national recruiting sense and literally not leave your own backyard if you're just going through LA, through the state of California, the Western region. Now, obviously, getting Champ Smith in Florida is a huge get for UCLA to expand that reach. You don't have to go far.
Right.
And even those underdeveloped 3 stars that turn into 4 stars, there are guys like that all around Southern California that can turn into superstars or good college players that maybe aren't ready to go as a freshman. You don't have to go that far. UCLA's just been, let's just not go that route. And finally, they're realizing just a little bit, a nudge in the right direction, and they can have a top 30 class, which is what they have in a certain outlet or two right now.
I think they should be a top 20 recruiting class every year because of what we just touched on. If they're not, that's on staff. And I know UCLA doesn't spend as much money on – I get that. But proximity to home matters, especially to moms. I know this for as long as I've followed recruiting. Zach, that is not going to change. They should sign 10 kids a year from the state of California on average, bare minimum. If they do that, then you pick one guy out of Florida, 1 or 2 out of Texas. Terry Donahue used to get 2 or 3 kids out of Texas every year, but he'd get like 12 kids out of Southern California, and they'd have top 5 classes. It's not that hard. So I think UCLA is going to be on the rise, and I think it's good for college football because USC is obviously recruiting at a ridiculous clip. It would be great to have UCLA and USC have a great rivalry game every year with a bunch of NFL draft picks on the field. So I'm kind of rooting for the Bruins to do that. It would be a lot of fun. Zach, tell everybody where they can find your work.
Well, you can go to Locked On UCLA. You can find it wherever you find your podcast on YouTube, Locked On UCLA. The Twitter is actually Locked On Bruins because we're funny about that. And then I'm Zach and Yox on X.com as well. Other than that, anytime UCLA news breaks, we'll be here talking about it on the Locked On Podcast Network. And anytime it's, fun stuff, if there's an eco situation, we'll be right there to cover it again too.
All right. I appreciate that, my friend. You can find the Portal Podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate you stopping in. Like and subscribe and share this podcast. We'll see you again. This has been a Locked Over from UCLA and the Portal.